Eclipse is the enormously popular science fiction empire-building game from designer Tauko Takakallio and publisher lautapelit.fi.
In Eclipse, players carefully manage their resources and their actions in order to build a great space empire and defeat their opponents. It plays in about 2 hours and supports from 2 to 6 players. The first mini-expansion, Supernova, adds a little bit of danger to exploration, while the first full-size expansion, Rise of the Ancients, adds new races, new challenges, new technologies, as well as room for up to 9 players.
At the start of Eclipse, each player chooses their race and their player board, and takes their influence discs, their population cubes, and their supply tokens. They also take their ships, their colony ships, their ambassador tiles, and their summary card. Then the board is laid out, so the galactic center is placed on the board, and then the starting hexes for each player. On that starting hex goes the player's influence disc, 1 interceptor ship, and population cubes to fill all the empty squares.
Now the main supply board will house the ship part tiles, the technology tiles, and the round marker. At the start of the game, a number of technology tiles determined by the number of players are randomly drawn and laid out here, while the rest of the technology tiles, as well as the bag of reputation tiles and any remaining tokens, go beside that main board.
Each of Eclipse's 9 rounds has 4 phases in it: action, combat, upkeep, and cleanup. During the action phase, the first player takes their rightmost influence disc off their influence track and places it into an action square on their player board. Actions include explore, move, build, research, upgrade, or influence.
To explore, a player chooses an empty space next to a hex where they have either a ship or an influence disc, and then draws a new hex tile from the corresponding pile. This hex is added in such a way that a wormhole on it matches up with a wormhole on the hex that you're moving from, and you're going to add either a discovery tile or an ancient marker depending on the symbols in the center of that hex.
The exploring player can then add an influence disc to that hex that they've just explored, and they can claim the discovery token in the center of that hex. They can choose to either claim the 2 victory point side of that token, or they can turn it over and claim the bonus listed on the other side. At any point during their turn, a player can activate a colony ship and move population cubes onto the hex that they've just explored. Advanced squares on planets, which are marked with a star, require advanced technology in order to populate. If there's an ancient in a hex, then you'll need to defeat that ancient ship before you can take over that hex and place an influence disc and claim the discovery tile.
So an influence action lets you move up to 2 influence discs, either from one of your hexes or from the influence track onto a new hex or back to the influence track. If you pull back a disc from a hex that has population cubes in it, then those are going to come back with you as well. Also, at any point during their turn, a player can exchange ambassador tokens with one of their neighbors and gain a population bonus and a victory point in exchange for this diplomatic action.
A research action allows a player to purchase a technology tile off the supply board if they pay the science cost on their supply track. If you buy more than one technology of the same type, you can start getting discounts to future purchases, and also you can start getting victory points. Technologies can allow you to upgrade your ships, to have access to advanced colonizing spots on planets, or they can give you one-off bonuses.
So an upgrade action lets you modify your ship's weapons, defenses, or abilities so long as you have the right technology, while a build action lets you produce up to 2 ships or structures by paying their materials cost on your supply track. Ships are going to let you fight other players or explore new hexes, while monoliths and orbitals give you either population or victory point bonuses.
A move action allows you to move 3 ships or move 1 ship 3 times. If you move into an area with enemy ships in it, that's considered a hostile action. So if you have a diplomatic relationship with that player, then you've just ruined it and you get the traitor tile beside your board. If you're moving out of a hex with enemy ships in it, you have to leave behind an equal number of ships as they have in that hex.
So on their turn, a player can either take 1 action or they can pass. A player who's passed can take one of the 3 lesser reaction actions in later turns, and the first player to pass in a given round is going to become the starting player for the next round.
After everyone has passed, it's time for the combat phase. So combats are resolved in hex numerical order. Then each ship goes in initiative order. Players roll dice equal to the amount of weapons that they have, and hits and damage are calculated. Combats continue in this way until one side or the other has either retreated or been completely destroyed. After the combat's complete, all of the combatants draw reputation tiles dependent on whether they succeeded or they failed in the battle. They can then choose to keep one of those tiles and place them face down on their player board. There's only room for 4 face down tiles on your player board, so once you have 4, you can still take more, but you have to replace older ones rather than gaining new ones.
During the upkeep phase, players can activate one of their remaining colony ships before moving each of their tokens up on the supply track based on the leftmost number in each of the population cube tracks. They're then going to have to pay for all the actions they took by moving the money marker back according to the leftmost number in their influence track. Now they can spend materials or science instead of money at a rate of 2 for 1, or reduce the cost that they've got to pay by taking back an influence disk. Of course, that's going to cost you the population cubes and control of the hex that it was on.
In the cleanup phase, players move their influence disks back from the action spaces onto their influence track. They then refresh any of their colony ships, and new technologies are placed on the supply board. At the end of the 9th round of Eclipse, the player with the most victory points wins the game. You can get victory points from reputation tiles, technologies, discoveries, or exploring hexes.
So probably my favorite thing about Eclipse is the way in which the order of the phases can create kind of a mini game with the ship upgrades. Because you can move your ships into somebody else's hex, so you know you're going to be fighting them, but you've still got time to buy technologies and upgrade the ships, which creates this really neat kind of focused arms race that's really quite a lot of fun. There's also a huge amount of bookkeeping in this game that's actually really well managed by the population cubes as well as the supply tracks. You don't ever feel like you really have to think about how you're keeping track of things, you just do it and then you can focus on your gameplay and strategy, which is a really cool thing to see. Now, all of that bookkeeping is a result of the fact that this is really more of an economic and a resource management game than it is kind of an epic conquest-y space opera like you'd get with, say, Twilight Imperium. I really like Eclipse. It has a huge amount to offer, but it doesn't quite scratch that epicness itch in the same way that a 6-hour game of TI might.
So another potential con to this game is the combat. There's a lot of really nice stuff in Eclipse. It's a great game, there's a lot of nice mechanics. However, when you get to the combat section, it can feel a little bit draggy, a little bit overly simplistic. You end up rolling a lot of dice for a very long time, and it can feel like maybe that part of the game could have been improved a little bit. However, there are a lot of great things about this game. It's light, it's relatively easy to learn, there are a huge amount of different things that you can do, there are a lot of different paths to victory. One of the things that I often don't like about games is the fact that at the beginning it feels like you're playing by yourself. Well, in this game you do kind of feel like you're playing by yourself at the beginning, but there is so much to do and so much to focus on and so many little things to play with that it doesn't matter, you still have a good time with it. Also, the components are fantastic. There's lots of wooden pieces, and I like wooden pieces. It feels like everything's really tough. You're not going to break anything really easily. It feels like this game was really well put together.